Today's conversation is about what it really takes to make sustainability work inside organisations that are dealing with real-world complexity, competing priorities and constant change. Our guest is Seri McClendon, CEO of the Clean Agency from Seattle now, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's right.
Seri brings a rare combination of strategic and practical experience, having worked across food and beverage, agriculture, packaging, apparel, hospitality, gaming, and government. Her work focuses on helping organisations develop sustainability strategies that are commercially credible, operationally grounded, and able to stand up under real-world constraints. She's also spent much of her career translating sustainability ambition into clear business cases, partnerships, and action. And today I'm keen to explore where sustainability strategies succeed, how they struggle, and what they tell us about the systems, tools, and capabilities that organisations still need to really build in this space. So Seri, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And to start off with, I'd just love to understand your path into this work. What drew you into sustainability originally, and how has leading the Clean Agency helped shape your perspective on what really enables change versus what sounds good on paper?
Well, I think just being from Seattle originally, there's a great environmental cause here, and it was part of being born and raised here. And then I went to Southern California for most of my career, and I was in marketing and advertising for many years, but then really had the calling to go back to environmental studies and actually worked into industrial ecology was my master's degree. So I started out Clean Agency over 24 years ago. And so the first few years were about educating corporations. And that was really my focus was consumer brands. And a lot of that was because I had contacts from my previous career there. So it was education and really helping them to start to talk about, the value of an environmental message to their brands. So we have been fortunate to work with some big companies like Mattel, Frito-Lay, Caesars, Nestle, big brands, and then also brands that are like in the apparel and foot and shoe industry that are focused on sustainability, like Allbirds and Reformation and other brands that's the core to their message and to their products. So it's been wonderful. It's been, I love going to work every day. I get to work with some of the smartest people, PhD and marketing, and just wonderful people out of great schools here in the U.S. So it's been great. This year's been a challenge, but I'm just glad to talk to people about it and share my thoughts.
I think you started off about the same time I got involved in this whole space as well. So we've jointly seen, I think, the pendulum swing multiple times backwards and forwards, and
it has.
there have been great periods within those 20-something years, and I think we probably feel like we're in a bit challenging phase at the moment. So it is good to keep talking to each other and keep promoting the work because it's essential. Seri, so many organisations I know over the years have started to develop sustainability strategies and targets, and there's been a big focus on that sort of reporting obligations. What's, from your perspective, do you see most often as there a gap between execution and their original intent in those strategies?
I think that's a good question. I think what happens is when we develop reports or a strategy on impacts, let's say there's usually the top one is carbon impacts, and then we go down to water, we go to biodiversity. And when we look at what I call life cycle assessment or LCA, there's many different factors you can look at. And what happens is we do an analysis at the end that we call hotspots. So there's areas where the number might be really high compared to the competitors. So a company will want to focus on that hotspot. So they're not going to go and try to conquer every single indicator. They're going to try to, by the next year, report out their improvement in those categories that they might be less productive in. So that's kind of what I see. I see that in reporting where they'll actually produce the difference in the number. And also, I think what's really great is the transparency that they do. A progressive company will say, we didn't do so good, and this is why. And so that's the best kind of reporting is to say, yes, we did it. We didn't do it, and this is why. And this is how we're going to fix it. They do. I mean, a lot of companies do that. So, and that in the beginning of my career, it was like one report and that was done.
Yeah.
And then they file it away. But now they tend to follow up.
Okay.
year
And do
by
you see
year.
it's much more integrated now as part of their normal governance arrangements? So they do
Yeah.
sustainability along with their risk management and other
Yes.
sort of corporate governance or documents?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of times they have to, if you're a supplier to a big brand, you have to sign up with like the CDP or other nonprofits that you report into your numbers so that they can report it as their supply chain, as you're part of their supply chain, which is even further out as far as impacts. So if it's a Nestle, then they're looking at their suppliers and saying you have to report in your environmental numbers so that we can
Do
report.
that. It was really interesting. I thought the debate that was happening across social media this year about Patagonia's sustainability report, and they were quite open apparently about. And I did have a quick skim of it of where they hadn't been doing so well. People seem to still criticize them for that, saying, they were this big sustainable brand and they were not achieving sustainability targets and goals.
And I think I always think to myself, you just as my businesswoman hat, it's like, okay, a company grows. Okay, so all of a sudden you've doubled your sales or you're going to double your impacts. And so, you have to understand that model as well. Like if a brand is very successful, they're going to just by the sake of being in business, they're going to grow. So that has to be considered as well as far as your impacts.
Yeah, yeah. So when you look across your client base, what sort of problems are showing up again and again, regardless of the sector?
Problems a lot has to do with consumer perception. So that's kind of been a huge draw to brands wanting to get into the sustainability market, I guess, or the communications around it. And so I think with social media and kind of like you were saying, the response to Patagonia, that there's a lot more criticism of these corporations. And so they don't like that, and they're going to keep wanting to push to say their story. Um, but it's a challenge for them because it's a big investment, and then how do you market it without getting the backlash? So I guess a good example is like Frito-Lay has come out with a compostable bag for all of their snacks and chips, and they tried that before with Sun Chips, and the bag totally failed. And
Right.
so now they're trying to continue to improve that. So I think it really is around the customer and then just about the fact that people can communicate so much easier about a brand now on social media.
Yeah.
That's the biggest influence for them, of course. And
And
also,
customers don't change as quickly sometimes as companies can do. Like you end
right.
up with a very, I guess, emotional attachment to a particular type of packaging that you had as a child or something, and then they,
Right, right.
yeah,
Or then also they'll kind of throw out, well, what are you doing about this other environmental issue? And then that's confusing because, people always say to me, well, what do you think about solar? And I'm like, I'm not a solar expert, so it's like, it's this huge, all these different ideas and things that you can talk about, but you're only an expert in so much in one particular field.
yeah. So, do you want to talk a little bit about your total life cycle analysis and talk how you go about going into a company and working through that process,
Sure.
what it involves?
So life cycle analysis is a really great tool for looking at it. You can look at a product like a package or a shirt or a shoe. And you look at everything from extraction of the raw material to the making of the item to the shipping of the item, the use of the item, and the disposal of the item. So the whole life cycle of what that particular item, the impacts that it had through that whole life cycle. And so there's a science behind it. We use software for it. And it's something that is very, very popular in Europe, much more standardized in Europe. And they'll run many SKUs or items through these analysis. And then they also can do comparative analysis to, let's say you change up a material or you reduce, it's compostable and it doesn't have to go into landfill. So you can do adjustments on those numbers and do improvements. So it's a really, I love it because it's a really comprehensive way of looking at your footprint. And so that's something that we have in the last few years have really focused on. And it's just been a great area to get people excited about it. And what happens is that then gets introduced into the innovation departments and the
Mhm.
designers. And so they start using that data, and we try to empower them to use it internally, getting tools for them to say, what if I do this in 100% recycled PET versus PET versus,
Yep.
virgin plastic. And so they're able to see their impacts in a tool internally. And that has been really successful for us. So although clean didn't start out so much in LCA, it's just really starting to take off in the US, but we're not as progressive as Europe is.
It is interesting, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
I see it as a life cycle analysis is the microcosm of the whole circular economy model.
Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned tools there. I guess it gets into my area of particular interest, which is around modern tools and AI and how they're helping in this space. And just be really interested in, yeah, what sort of areas you have seen it used, or if it's becoming something that's becoming more used in the type of work you're doing.
Yes, for sure. Traditionally, we have used platforms like Gabby and SEMA Pro and OpenLCA. So there's established databases that have basically international numbers for a particular material, and usually you have to define a functional unit, which then you move through that and do your comparison based on if it's like a pair of shoes or a can of Coke, or you figure that out and then you move that through the process. So those are traditional databases that are highly respected and highly licensed and used globally. So if
Yeah.
I'm working with a vendor in China, they're going to still pull from the same databases.
Yeah.
So the challenge with I mean, I think there's great things about it for LCA and for the environment. And then there's not so great, but I wish I could predict where it's going to go with our industry. But right now, the beauty of it, I think, is allowing a client to understand life cycle assessment on their own before they even come to clean. So there's a way that, like, through AI, that they can start to understand, like, what's the functional unit, what's my bill of sale, what does that mean,
Mm.
how do I use that to start to collect my data. So it's highly effective for that. Some of the platforms that are out there that are being developed around LCA and AI grab data that's secondary. So it's not so
Mhm.
much it's proprietary data within the software, traditional software. So, but they're still grabbing it somewhere, but it's not verified. So I don't know if that's going to change, but as it gets stronger and stronger with more data being put into AI, but right now, it doesn't really have good references to where that data point is.
Yeah.
So the whole science part of it can kind of be dummied down at this point, and so we're very wary of that. So it still involves having that expertise and that, the, like I said, PhD level person to look at that and say, does that number make sense? And in my research team, and just kind of in this last like year, it really has hit us as far as looking at numbers. It can vary between 20 to 30% from like
Right.
the true number that we know. So, and brands can get in trouble if they go out and publish something, and then, like, with consumers or watchdog groups that 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 can challenge that number. They can, like, H&M had went out with kind of AI numbers, and they got sued because
Yeah.
they weren't reporting correctly. So I don't know if that's just baby steps to making it more efficient, but right now that's what I know as of right now.
Yeah. It is. It is a space where, as you say, I think it's growing significantly, and obviously needs lots of guardrails around it. And
No,
from my perspective, it can help with, say, saving 20 to 30% of your time by getting started with pulling together information from a whole bunch of different sources.
right.
And it's really great at pattern recognition. The tools that I use with my clients is that's one of the things that it really helps flesh those out. But then you really do need to understand and put very clear constraints around about it. Your job is not to do this. We don't want you to come up with a number for us,
Right.
and to then have the human oversight to still sit over the top of everything, to like you mentioned there, to make sure it
Yeah.
all makes sense. So it's
Right.
not replacing all the work, it's just trying to, I think, make things a bit more streamlined and allow you to free up some time to spend on other things.
I think that our biggest gap whenever we start a project is we get people, the team, and it's usually cross-functional teams in a corporation, and people get really excited about it. And but then you're like, okay, here's your questionnaire to go out to your suppliers. Here's what you need to
Yeah.
get this data, and they get really frustrated, and it tends to be a lull. Like it could be, between 2 weeks to 2 months before you actually get the data from the client because they have to go out and do so much work. And so I think AI could really help them in that process. And maybe even saying to suppliers, here's a general number. Does this seem like, I don't know how, but
Yeah.
I think right now that could be a really great advantage in getting it done much quicker and more efficiently, instead of being so burdensome to the whole supply chain.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's a good idea to test out the little different pain point. Or it can help in certain areas, but other areas you just wouldn't use it for or something.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And in terms of sustainability reporting itself, how influential are you finding it in terms of changing companies' practices overall and getting them, as you say, you've got innovation areas and teams and technology teams involved? What do you find? Is it because they're being required to do it, or is it because genuinely there's a sense that it's better for them from a public perspective or economically that it's a better outcome for them if they can achieve better sustainability outcomes?
I think it's definitely, we call them stakeholders, where it's like you look at maybe if it's a publicly traded company, you've got your shareholders, and then you've got your customers, you've got um, your employees. That's a big thing. The younger workers want to work for a company that is sustainable.
Yeah.
So there's all these reasons to do it. Economically, it's huge. I cannot go to a client and say, use this type of material. It's going to cost you 3 times as much. They're not
No.
going to do it. But I can also go to a client and say, the benefit of the analysis is like you're spending too much on this, or you're using, like for Nestle, they were wrapping their pallets in this plastic that was really expensive. And they, in some plants, and other plants, they weren't. And so we were like, why is this happening?
Sure.
And they stopped wrapping them, and they ended up saving like millions of dollars because of just they were so big that they didn't understand the difference between each of these factories. I mean, they have, several brands. And so
Yeah.
those are the type of analysis that we can do to help save money. But it's unless it's a brand like a Patagonia or Allbirds or Reformation, that's the core to what they do, then they will spend the more money for the story and for it to be authentic to the brand. But
Mhm.
major brands, that's not necessarily where their selling spot is around sustainability.
And so how do you find your clients for Clean? Because you're a traditional sales marketing background, you just reach out to people, or is it
Yeah.
you've got a regular recurring client now, but do you still constantly going out looking for new people to sell
Yeah.
your services
Yeah.
to?
It's kind of in my blood as far as sales, and it's hard when my team, there's so much. I mean, it's so smart, and I don't know. I'm not an LCA practitioner, but I hire the best, and I sell because that's what I love to do, and I
Yeah.
so believe in what I'm doing and my team, and so it's the part I love. And yeah, traditional is kind of just word of mouth, lots of referrals, which is awesome. And yeah, just regular marketing and reaching out. It's the fun part for me. Well, I think everyone else is like, I don't want to do that.
You get a bunch of scientists or sort of environmental specialists.
Yeah.
Uh, So if you were to wave a magic wand and remove one or two constraints that are really limiting your agency's ability to deliver your impact that you want to do at scale, what would they be?
That's a good question, Alex. I think that right now we're just having a lot of difficulties in our government as far around science. And so we feel that if the government doesn't back science-based services like or acknowledge climate change or the EPA and such, that it's really a hinder on the rest of us in private business to do our work. So that if that's hopefully going to change. And then I think that the challenge with my clients right now is that they're trying to stay in business and not thinking about long term just because of the economic pressures they have right now. So if we could get back to where we were and really measuring and carrying and reporting, then that would be super great for Clean and for all my other colleagues. And I think it will. It just has a hiccup right now. And so that would be just the current restraint. And it happened quickly, but it will change. The pendulum will swing the other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also think that AI is going to create more opportunities for Clean and getting away from having to do those big data analysis that is very time intensive. I'm excited to see where we can take it and grow it in the direction of strategy and science versus the drudgery of the calculations. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Well, if it can take a bit of the pressure off by reducing your costs in some areas or companies' cost in some areas, because it can help with filling in some of these reports or at least the first draft of things, cut of an analysis. It helps take a bit of that pressure off when they're constrained in
Agreed.
other ways as well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So looking ahead 5 years, Seri, what do you think really is going to define consultancies and like yours that are doing well and those that are struggling in this space?
I think that the model's going to look different. I'm not quite sure how, but I think there's going to be a lot more collaboration. And like, if you think even about LCA and it's very linear and it's very kind of brand specific, I think it's going to become much more transparent globally. And I think that it's going to be more of a shared powerful discipline. And I think that could be really cool. Instead of everyone trying to do it themselves, it will be a much more it'll have much more impact when people can start to really share and not feel like this is my proprietary data. It could be really great, and it could move our efforts for reduction of these impacts forward substantially.
Yeah,
That's kind of what I see.
that's pretty good vision to have. I know for me, when I'm thinking about data and stuff, it's around like the environmental impact side of things and how it would be great to have joined up, say, offsets as management, which I think you do a lot of in the US,
Yes.
but we're not so good at that in Australia yet, where you
Mhm.
have, things happening at a regional scale to offset impacts of developments. Having that sort of joined up scale at the front end of things as well, when we're talking about products being manufactured or generated and then marketed and sold and used and disposed of.
Right.
And people being able to think about that in that context would be amazing.
Yeah, I think so too.
If anybody out there is sort of feeling overwhelmed by sustainability delivery, rather than and wanting to get into this space, what would you recommend? Is there one particular mindset shift that you think can help them get across this or help them shift outcomes?
I think that word sustainability is so broad, and I know we all say that in the industry because it's kind of to my point before about people ask me about electric cars, and I'm like, I have no idea, because that's not my expertise. So if you just take a baby step into one area that might be of interest to you, and think about how you can learn a lot about that one particular subject, I think that is a good way to do it. And people are experts on like sustainable packaging and cardboard. Like that's all they do all day long. And
Mm,
so it's very specific. And then,
yeah.
instead of being a generalist, it's kind of hard to do, I think, in my field. I think you have to just take one part that is of interest. Like to me, I think because as consumer products, I just think that's fascinating. It's like, what do you do at the end of the day with your Coke can? And where does it go? So I think that's the best way to approach it instead of just
Mm,
being overwhelmed by the whole industry.
yeah. It's a good point. And a good point to end on. So thank you again. I think that's been a really fascinating conversation for me anyway. So I'm
Thank
sure other
you,
people
Al.
will enjoy it too. So really
Thank you
appreciate you
so
taking
much.
the time
It
to
was a
join us.
pleasure. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.